did you at any point do the Sam Jackson speech?
No, I didn't. And Faux Ben suggested it was one of the best suggestions that we've ever seen. We're going to need all kinds of inspirational speeches today, because otherwise you do not survive in the insane wilderness. You sprain your ankle, you forget to start a fire. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Joystiq Streams. It is Tuesday, and it is 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means that we are going to play some video games. And today, we're continuing our trend of playing deeply unsettling games this week. And this one in particular, we've already met with one ignoble end. We're playing The Long Dark by Hinterland Games. Hinterland has made a survival game, a first-person survival game that takes place in an unusual sort of post-apocalyptic setting. It's a technological apocalypse. Richard Mitchell from Joystiq is going to be behind the wheel today. Hello, Richard. And pardon me, Raphael from Hinterland Games is joining us today, the co-founder of Hinterland Games, and the man whom you can blame for the difficult surviving techniques that you will face in this game. Hello, Raphael.
Hey, and I just saw that my technical director, Alan Lawrence, just logged in, so he's going to ask all kinds of hard questions, I'm sure, and trying to embarrass me on here.
Woo!
Well, I'll just sort of lay out the general feelings here on the title screen. We've got this rifle, a backpack, a shovel, maybe bad things happening, a couple of tombstones back here, and I'm just going to jump into a sandbox. It looks like there's a story mode, but this is not a complete game at this point.
Well, so as I said before we started, right now we have the sandbox mode of the game in alpha. We won't be launching the story mode until it's essentially done, and it is a big focus for us. We've discussed it various times, you know, all the major voice actors that we have assigned to it or attached to it. But for now, we're really focused on the sandbox. And I should mention, this is the first time actually we've shown any gameplay footage of the recent, you know, the more recent game. So hopefully you guys like what you see.
Welcome aboard, everybody.
Okay, my game actually crashed for a second, but hopefully I got it back.
That's Alan's fault.
Well, Raph,
actually, it never crashes. It's crazy.
It's perfect from the outset. It was made perfectly as soon as you guys conceived it. I'm actually a little curious how you did conceive of The Long Dark. There's been a sort of renewed interest in survival games over the past 4 years. And I feel like if you go back to like 2010 with Minecraft and then stretch it out over the past few years to things like DayZ, there is a new interest in putting you into an incredibly forbidding environment in a game and just telling you to sort of make it on your own. Why did Hinterland Games want to sort of get in and make their own survival game?
Well, you know, it's been an idea that's been kind of in the back burner for a few years now, and you know, it's more about timing. Decided at one point that I was finished working in the AAA space and wanted to do something as an independent, and wanted to do something that would let us take creative risks. And for a long time, I'd been thinking about, you know, how to make a survival game that was really purely about the mechanics of survival and not about combat. I was really inspired by Fallout 3, which I played a hell of a lot of, and I often found myself wandering around in that game and just enjoying the exploration aspect of it. You know, every location that I could see on the horizon was a place that could be explored and looted and whatnot, and really it was more about that than it was about the actual combat mechanics of the game. I remember when it first came out and the level cap was 20, I played well beyond that into like level 40 or something, and not getting any perks or experience just because I was having so much fun exploring the world. And that's sort of where one of the seeds kind of was planted. You know, would it be possible to make an interesting post-disaster experience that was really more about survival? And then, you know, being a Canadian and having worked in the industry for about 13 years for Canadian studios, I'd thought, you know, isn't it time that we have a game that feels that it reflects a little more of our personal identity or our cultural identity. And that's kind of how some of it started. And the setting of the game is really inspired by where the studio is headquartered, which is on Vancouver Island in Canada. And if anyone who's ever been out here I think they'll see some similarity in the way the world looks.
Oh no!
Oh no!
That is a wolf. Oh god!
That is a wolf.
It is right there. Oh, and he's after me too.
Well, he's hungry.
I have nothing to fight it with.
You have your hands. Do it up the Grey style, man. What would Qui-Gon Jinn do?
I don't think that movie was really good until the end. Can I just punch it? I don't think I have any offensive capabilities right now. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not a combat game, right? Oh. But if you get close enough, you will have to tangle with him. I'll say that much.
Okay, he left me alone.
Raph, I'm very interested in this emphasis on not having combat. I feel like, especially if you're going to make something that is emotionally harrowing, if you're going to make a game that's emotionally harrowing, there has been this conception in the past that you need to have some kind of conflict that's immediately understandable, and combat is the one, combat is the instant access to
nice.
That. So why are you so interested in making a game
feel my hands.
That doesn't have combat?
Well, it's not that we don't have any combat, but it's really not a focus. And I think for us, the focus of the game is really about trying to learn what the world is telling you, and then make good decisions based on that information. So really, it plays upon what a simulation is, which is the game gives you the data, but it doesn't do the thinking for you, which is something that I think a lot of games sort of forgotten, that it's important to leave something for the players to do and not kind of give them too much guidance. And that was really one of the big sort of philosophical pillars for us when we were designing the game, was to just, internally we talk about something being too hand-holdy or not, in terms of not wanting to give the player too much guidance or help, and leaving it up to them to decide, how they're going to solve the various problems. So our job is to put the information into the world in a clear way, and then your job is to interpret that information and make good decisions based on it. So, combat is part of that, but it's really a lot more about exploration and just treating the environment itself as an obstacle and something that needs to be overcome.
So one of the questions I have about survival games in general, like starting with Minecraft, although Minecraft has sort of an end game to it now. Didn't when it came out, and people would spend hours just surviving, pretty much. And I think DayZ is kind of the same thing. I don't think there's... I don't want to call it a point, like the goal that you're trying to reach, but that is sort of one of the questions I always have about these kinds of games, that they seem so open-ended that, what is it that you want people to strive toward? Or do you find that the people who play your games are just happy to go out and survive as long as they can and then try again?
What we've found so far in our playtesting is people are really happy with having a free-form sandbox experience that doesn't have a lot of guidance or like objectives that we're putting out there for them. Right now, all we have is essentially like, how long can you survive for within this environment? And that seems to be enough to drive people's sort of competitive nature. And what they find is the game is really a big puzzle, and they're always looking for ways to optimize, in terms of how they find supplies or how they maximize the use of the resources that they have. I should mention a couple things about randomization. So the starting point is random. All the loot in the game is random, or 99% of the loot is random. We have a couple things that we bias towards being more frequently found just because they're really critical path items, like ammunition, for example. But in most cases, random. The items that you find are random. Where you'll encounter wildlife is largely random. The time of day, the weather that you'll find yourself in when you start is random. Weather transitions are random. So there's a lot of randomness in the game. It's not. That really plays into the sort of self-directed nature of the game's objectives. It's really more about players deciding for themselves how they want to play. And what we find in our playtesting so far is that, people sort of take on a playing style and have a way of, some people decide to hunker down in a certain location. They pick like, this camp office, for example, and they'll gather supplies and kind of, stockpile them in here and use this as their base of operations. And other people will wander around the level, and they'll have a couple places that they tend to stop at, and they'll have one eye on wolves and one eye on the weather, and try to be ready to react to whatever the world throws at them. So, there's yeah, I mean, I think in this case it's really more about having a freeform experience and letting players decide for themselves, what they want to do. And the story mode is definitely going to be a little more directed because we need to be able to tell an interesting story. And so, the gameplay will be the same, but I think story mode is definitely going to add a different, it's going to change the experience. It's going to add a layer of narrative, a layer of clearer objectives. I sort of think about it almost in terms of, single player versus multiplayer in a way, where, single player is where the story happens and, where you kind of become invested in the world, and then multiplayer is where you get your extended playing time and where you continue experiencing the mechanics. And for us, we don't have a multiplayer mode. It's only a single player game, but the Sandbox is kind of that free-form, repeatable experience.
So, Raph, you were talking about all of these random elements. Are the same things going to be random in the single player, like in the story section of the game? You said you're going to start in this random place, and you're going to have the weather be this random thing. The items will be placed randomly. Is that the same in the Sandbox version as well?
A lot of it will be.
A lot of it will be.
Yeah, I mean, we have full control over what we choose to make random or not. So it really comes down to, a lot of playtesting and just finding the right balance between, what level of randomness is acceptable and is interesting for players, and what level of sort of authorship do we need to still retain control of in order to provide a good experience for players.
So what makes me sort of curious about that is you were saying, you need to make it a little bit more directed in order to tell a really good story. Why don't more random elements sort of still allow you to tell an interesting story? If you can you plan for those and still tell a really linear story at the same time, or do you have to have certain things happening at sort of gated moments throughout the game?
Yeah, I think it's more about, if we say that a certain event needs to happen at a certain time in a certain place of the world in order for you to be successful in the single player story mode, we have to make sure that you can, it's possible for you to do that. The game is fairly unforgiving in the sense that if you die, it's permadeath. Like, it doesn't. You can save every time you rest. The game saves, so you can reload. But once you die, that game is erased, right? So you can't get it back, and that's something that, for example, in the story mode it's just too unforgiving. So and then suddenly when you change the way the save system works, there's just other aspects of gameplay that you have to tune differently to kind of compensate for that. So what Sandbox allows us to do, because it's non-narrative and it's totally freeform, is we can just focus on making the survival mechanics kind of as challenging as possible. And randomization is obviously a big part of that. And because there's no story sort of gating going on, people, I think, are a lot more forgiving of, having perceived bad luck or making bad decisions. Whereas in the story mode, you wouldn't feel very forgiving of us if you lost, many days worth of playtime because, you didn't have an item that you really needed to survive didn't spawn randomly when you needed it to, for example.
So, Rev, tell me about what the hell happened here. What I've read about the Long Dark is there's this electromagnetic event, and there's very little usable electronic technology in the world anymore. So for Richard's sake, what the hell is going on?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say for Richard's sake is you can actually run if you press shift.
Yeah, well, I am running, but it's slow.
Okay. Yeah, so we're really holding back on a lot of details about the fiction of the world because it's really a big part of what we're doing in the story mode. But the big picture is essentially there has been a geomagnetic event that has essentially wiped out all technology, and the effect of that is that it's brought sort of humanity down a few sort of links in the food chain, and all the things that we have that give us an advantage over nature, which tend to be technology, are suddenly kind of taken out of the equation. And by starting in a sort of more wilderness setting, first of all, it's a bit of a differentiator. I mean, we're not going to be another urban apocalypse. We're not going to compete with Naughty Dog and make a better version of The Last of Us. So we really wanted to do something that would just feel fresh and different, and starting it in a non-urban wilderness setting felt like a good way to do that. But I think sort of philosophically or thematically, it's more interesting because we're an outsider. We're an outsider looking in, and we're starting in this rugged wilderness, and our first goal is to just simply survive. And as we become more competent at surviving and we learn to master the mechanics, now we can explore deeper into the world and uncover more and more details about the mystery. So, you know, we're being intentionally vague on the details about what's happened in the world. But yeah, like I said, the high-level outline is it's a post-disaster setting that's been brought on by, you know, natural causes for the most part.
I'm curious will you get that sense that the world has crumbled from just wandering around in the wilderness? Like, you know, at this point, I can't sort of distinguish that something has gone wrong, or if Richard is just pulling a Bear Grylls / Into the Wild sort of thing, like going all Chris McCandless on us and just trying to, you know, to be a wild man. Did you just find an ice fishing hut, Richard?
I believe I did.
Nice. Just hang out.
Yeah. So to answer your question, the events of the game essentially take place fairly, you know, soon after this event transpires. So it's not like, you know, Fallout, where it's like 200 years after an apocalypse, you know, and the world has kind of fallen apart in the meantime, and you're exploring this ruined setting. I think the first ways in which you'll feel that sense of the world having changed is when you encounter AI survivors in the world and kind of their reaction to things and how you choose to respond to them. And that's something that that's still forthcoming. I mean, it's not in the sandbox right now. It's something that we're working on. Really, for us right now, it's about making sure that the core mechanics are working well. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be the first place where you really start to get a sense of how the world has changed. And then the further into the story you explore, the more you're going to learn about the state of the world. And, you know, ultimately at the end of season 1, you know, you'll start to have a pretty good idea of what's happened. And then we sort of leave things on a cliffhanger and reveal, you know, the next big outstanding questions that you need to try and answer. So, you know, we should talk a little bit about story mode and that it's episodic, I guess similar to what the Telltale guys have done with the Walking Dead games. You know, we're trying to take our cues narratively from what we see in television, which I think is doing a lot of the best storytelling in any medium right now. But it allows us to do a lot of cool things in terms of how we expand the sandbox and tie it in with narrative, and how we continue expanding the game over time.
Do you have any concerns that with this going on to early access and it just being the sandbox mode, that the community and interest you build around the game is going to sort of lock down its identity? That there will be people that are like, this is what the Long Dark is. It is go out, you're going to have random conditions, and then you need to live out in the woods and just try to stay alive. And then there won't be interest in the story mode later on. That's a hard transition to make between this very, very sort of solitary, free-form thing, and then a game that's just trying to tell you a television-style, you know, episodic story. How do you sort of keep the game's identity pure if you're rolling those two things out separate from each other?
Well, the game in story mode is the same game as the sandbox, right? I mean, the way in which it might be slightly different is, as I mentioned, we may decide at certain points to make aspects of it, you know, for narrative reasons, less random. So we might say like, hey, this thing needs to happen during a blizzard, so we're going to make sure a blizzard happens at that point, as opposed to leaving it completely random. But I make the comparison more to something like a Skyrim or a Fallout, where it's one holistic game, but some players prefer to have a more freeform open experience, and other players prefer to have a more like quest-driven narrative experience. And what I think we're providing is you know, two discrete experiences that are going to scratch each of those itches sort of independently. And the way the sandbox has been structured allows us to kind of continue expanding it independently over time with new regions and new gameplay and new gear items and new explorable locations, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, by having an episodic story structure, we can kind of do the same thing on the story side based on what we choose to do with the different narrative arcs and whatnot. So, I mean, more directly to answer your question about early access, I think it's our job to make sure people understand that they're playing the sandbox, and that there's more to come down the road. I don't think that when they play the story mode, they're going to think, oh, this is a totally different game. They're just going to it's just going to be a different kind of experience for them. It's going to be one that involves storytelling and characters and shows them some different aspects to the game than they get to experience in Sandbox.
So there are no people out there for Richard to meet right now.
Right now, there are no people for Richard to meet.
How do you go about making an AI that is going to be interesting in this sort of environment? How do you need them to behave in this sort of emotionally fraught survival situation? Do you need them to be unpredictable? Do you need them to have very sort of defined basic personalities? How do you make something that's effective in this place? Where are you going once you start building these people into the game?
Well, I mean, it's the function of a good AI to give the player interesting choices, or force interesting choices in some cases. And so you can see, for example, with the wolves here, there may be life-saving resources on the other side of an area that's populated by wolves, and you'll have to make a decision about whether you're willing to risk traveling across it or whatever. You'll notice that different times of day elicit different wildlife behaviors. So there's the wildlife is more active at night than during the day. For example, when you encounter a wolf, because we don't provide you with traditional kind of tutorials, you kind of need to solve how are you going to overcome that obstacle as a bit of a puzzle, and there's a bunch of different ways you can approach it based on the resources that you have and the risks that you're willing to take. And so, I think in general, the purpose of an AI is to give the player an opportunity to make some interesting choices, and in some cases to force those interesting choices in a way that you might not be entirely comfortable with. When we bring in the human AI, then we get to sort of take it up a notch in a sense, because we can add different types of intent. And our ideas there involve, wanting to keep those encounters somewhat ambiguous in the sense that, a lot of games, as soon as you see an AI, you know it's hostile, and there's not really any kind of puzzle to be solved with how you're going to interact with them. It's really,
right.
Kill or be killed. In our case, there may be really important supplies or knowledge or whatever that you need. Are you going to just shoot first and try to remove a risk, and in doing so, are you going to end up taking away an opportunity to get really important knowledge that you probably would have needed to survive? What kind of a survivor are you going to be? Are you going to be one of these people that just goes around trying to steal shit from everybody and be hostile and kill everyone? Or are you going to try and be a little more of a lone wolf? Or are you going to try to actually help other people that you come across? So, it's all about trying to make interesting choices, and in a lot of ways put additional stress on the resources that you're already having, because the core loop of the game is really built around exploration and resource gathering, as you can see. And so everything we're doing outside of that with combat and AI is forcing, putting pressure on those different systems. So forcing you to use resources that you've gained maybe before you're ready to do it. Opening opportunities for you to trade. This is down the road when we have the NPCs in there. Trade with people for knowledge or goods that you need to survive, or whatever it might be.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick 30-second
Looks like
break.
this has been
Those
here a
of you
while.
with Turbo, we're going to be hanging out anyway, so we'll see you in just a second. We're going to keep talking anyway while the commercial is rolling. Richard, how's it going out there?
Well, I've let's open up my inventory. I've gathered a lot of stuff. Several packages of beef jerky, candy bars. Got lots of canned peaches, fire.
Have you been eating?
What?
Richard, I'm worried about you. I want to make.
You need to eat more
when you're in the long dark.
I have quite a few different things here. I got a can opener, which is good because I have a lot of canned food. And I got some rifle ammunition. No rifle with which to shoot it, however. And listening to you guys talk about the AI characters and everything, I'd probably leave these wolves and stuff well enough alone unless they attacked me, because it doesn't look like I'm coming across a lot of things with which to defend myself if I needed it,
So, one quick question, Richard. Can you see your feet?
Yeah. Can I see my feet?
No seeing your feet. All right. That was asked a lot.
No seeing my feet.
Yeah. There were a bunch of people who wanted to know if you could see your feet.
Right. And whoever this character is, he is a man. I've been listening to him talk every once in a while. And is it a specific character, by the way, or is this just like an everyman? Or
well, in the story mode, we talk about Will Mackenzie as the protagonist. He's a bush pilot who's crashed in the wilderness because of this event, this geomagnetic event, and essentially he's trying to figure out what's going on. Right now, the voice that you hear is Mark Neer, who played Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, amongst other roles. And he's doing the voice for Mackenzie. We also have David Hayter in the cast. We have Jennifer Hale, and we have Elias Tofexis in the cast. So I can maybe give you an idea of kind of the caliber of talent that we're bringing into the story mode.
Sure.
My writing partner on the game is actually Marianne Krasik, who wrote all the God of War games. So again, we've got some pretty high caliber talent working on this project, and that's the dev team itself is all top shelf talent. Alan here in the chat room here is a 15+ year veteran of the industry. Was the technical director at Volition on Saints Row and Red Faction for many years. Dave Chan, my audio director, is an ex-BioWare guy who worked on all their original franchises, including Knights of the Old Republic and the first Mass Effect, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody on the team is very strong. In a way, it's a small team. There's only about 7 or 8 of us working on this. Probably a bit overambitious in a lot of ways, but we're just that's kind of how we're wired. And I think we all decided,
if I don't rest,
when we're ready to try to do something independent, that we just wanted to do something that still felt like a game that we wanted to play. And so, it definitely has a feeling of being, it's a so-called indie game, but I think it's still a gamer's game. There's still a lot of hardcore gameplay in there that should appeal to a lot of different players, I think.
Raph, go ahead.
My character just informed me that if I don't rest soon, I'm going to faint. And I looked at my window here, and sure enough, my fatigue is almost full. I guess that means if that gets to the top, it's like...
All right, everybody in the chat is recommending the same thing that your mother is recommending, which is warm up, eat, and get a good night's sleep, Richard.
Oh, but I found a coat! I found a winter coat!
Don't forget to put it on.
Yeah, no, I've learned that. Let's see, basic winter coat. There it is. And I get a +3 degrees Celsius warmth bonus. Very nice.
Raph, what do you think? What do you think the benefits are to making a game like The Long Dark with a smaller team, with a crew that rolls only 7 people deep? Because I could see how having like a giant 200-person team and $100 million to make something like The Long Dark would be appealing, so that you could have this huge workforce to handcraft all these little assets. But I feel like having a smaller team gives you certain advantages. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what those advantages are.
Well, you're certainly a lot more agile, right? I mean, when you're working with those huge teams and those huge budgets, you're really, in a lot of ways, you're even more constrained, because the metric by which you judge your success is how many copies of the game can I sell and can we recoup our budget. Whereas for us, because we're smaller and the budget's smaller, we can take some creative risks, and we don't need to sell as many copies to
I'm tired of starvation.
Actually make it. I'm trying to figure out what's happening here. Did you die?
I died of starvation, dehydration, and exposure while sleeping.
So, certainly it's great to have a small team. You can make decisions really quickly. It's easier to have sort of a singular vision that can get communicated across people and kind of upheld by the team. We don't answer to anyone, which is nice because, well, except for our community, which is nice because often when you work on these huge projects with big publishers and whatnot, you're always working, you're not necessarily trying to achieve art. You're really more trying to make a product. And I think for us, this is really about trying to create something special and meaningful that we can be proud of and, look back on years from now and feel like we took a shot, we took a risk. And those are just things that are really hard to do when you work, with huge teams and with huge budgets. So it's really simply about that. It's just about wanting to have the freedom to be able to take risks and try to do some different things. And that really comes down to, keeping the budgets reasonable. And I really don't think that you could make a game like this at a big publisher. It's just too unconventional.
So
this is a really awesome view. Just
God, with that little bit of light in the night sky, that is cool.
Here's a basic question, actually. The game is obviously called The Long Dark. Is the day-night cycle different from a usual day-night cycle, or is like the night longer? Is it normal?
The day is slightly longer than night. The day is 80 minutes of real time, and the night is 60 minutes of real time. So altogether, the day is about 140 minutes of actual time. So that basically extrapolates to 1 minute of real time is 10 minutes in the day, in the game rather. So, and you know, time scale is something that we've been experimenting with. We actually just recently in one of our alpha updates just changed the length of the day because people felt like we were putting too much pressure on them to make quick decisions because the day was actually only half as long, and which meant, you know, the distances were the same, but weather would change more quickly, the night would come more quickly. You know, they felt like they didn't have enough time to get to different destinations before their calories kind of ran out. And so, you know, it just gives you a sense of where things are at when you're in an alpha and you have playtesters. You have the ability to try all these different things based on playtesting feedback, which is one of the reasons why we're so excited to take the Sandbox to early access, because we have a pretty small sample right now, and we're about to open up the game to our alpha backers, which will be a bigger group, but ultimately we want to be able to, you know, get thousands and thousands of players in there and hear what they have to say about the game. What do they like about it? What direction would they like us to take various features? And you know, for us, it's really exciting to be in, you know, doing this kind of development, because we all come from a world where, you know, we're heads down for years at a time, and we don't really get to talk to the community at all. Or if we do, it's always after the game's pretty much already finished. So it's really been, you know, frightening, but also really liberating to share things really early and you know, get feedback from players and involve them in that process.
See, and this is unfair. This is unfair because it's a nightmare scenario. It's not what's inevitably going to happen. But when I think about community feedback, I always think about that scene in The Simpsons when they end up designing Poochie, where like, you know, they're sitting in the you know, focus group with all the children, and they're like, he should be from space, he should wear sunglasses, and then the guy behind the screen is just like, you're stupid and you don't know what you want. Like, is there a concern when you are getting constant community feedback that things that may not need to change, or things that actually do need to change, are sort of lost in a sea of all of these different voices?
I think there is a danger, or there could be a danger of that. I think for us, you know, we built a game around a set of creative pillars, and we have a vision for where we want to take it. And so for us, having access to all this playtesting feedback is really more about just getting more data. It's just getting more information with which we can make decisions. We're not asking our community to decide for us what the game should be. We know what we want the game to be. We're just trying to use them to validate our decisions. And if there's certain things that a lot of people tell us they don't like, then that's something that we want to listen to, because you know, we don't want to put out a game that is going to be fundamentally frustrating for people for various reasons. And sometimes, you know, you get really close to a project and you don't always see, you can't be objective about it anymore, right? And you need to kind of take your head up and listen to what other people have to say, and then go heads down again and contemplate it and think about what it means. But you know, this is our game. This is a game that we're making. You know, we've been doing this for a long time. We feel confident that we know how to make a good quality experience, and I think our pedigree sort of speaks to that. And so for us, involving the playtesters is really about, you know, opening it up to as many people as we can to hear what they have to say, but then ultimately we're still going to be making the decisions based on the feedback that we get.
So, as a developer, and obviously you're not culling data from what Richard's doing right now, but you're looking at the way Richard's playing. What are you thinking about your game right now based on what he's doing? Like, is there something the game isn't communicating to him, or are you looking at it and saying like, ah, yes, everything's going exactly as planned?
Well, we are actually gathering a log right now as you're playing. If you open up the survival panel, you'll see there's a log that tracks all the locations you visited and various actions, like when you have injuries or where you get food or whatever. And we have access to that data, or we can get access to that data, and we can use that to understand more about how people are playing the game. you know, we also will integrate more analytics so we can pull more data about where people died and the calories they used up before they died, and where did they die and why did they die, and try to use that to help with balancing if necessary. But in terms of watching Richard play, you know, I think maybe the game's a little too easy for him.
Right now, I have not found a single structure yet. I've found these train tracks, which is giving me some hope. But, you know, last time I thought I was doing pretty well, and I found those cabins, but they didn't have anywhere to start a fire, so I went out to the fishing hole that had a stove, and then I died of exposure. Granted, they didn't have a door on them, but maybe I should have gone back to the camp office.
What you can see is it is a very quiet, exploration-focused game. And someone earlier in the chat made a comment about it, you know, being an empty world game. And I don't know if they meant that like with snark or not, but I think that in a lot of ways it's true. It's not that it's empty, it's just that it's not full of all the usual shit that you find in games that are trying to pad stuff, right?
Right.
And I mean there's a lot of depth in this simulation that you're playing right now. It's just that it's not all surfaced in UI, and you got to dig under it to understand how it works. You know, and so yeah, I mean I think you're doing well, and I think that you know, nighttime is coming, and you're about to meet a wolf.
Can I get this train car? It's nice. Nope, I thought I could get the train car, but I can't.
Oh, you can.
Oh, build strength, build strength, build strength, build strength, attack! Build, attack! Nope. I'm dead. I was trying to get in the train car, but you can't.
Well, that wolf hates hobos anyway.
So
you made a hobo simulator.
In all fairness, we just did a tuning update, and I think I might have tuned the wolf a little too hard right now.
I got close to him in the first place, and then I searched through a bag, which I probably shouldn't have because it was taking too much time. But oh look, I found a snow-covered hill.
That is horrifying when the wolf is on top of you, just savaging your face. Alright, so obviously it's working, because just watching the profound relief of seeing daylight is like, oh thank God. Oh, this is so much better.
So, well, Richard, let me ask you, are you having fun?
I'm enjoying sort of trying to get a grasp on everything. And this is something that Anthony and I have talked about before, especially after Shovel Knight came out, which these are obviously radically different games, but a long time ago, back in, you know, the 80s and 90s,
I could use this.
When they didn't have as many resources to show you how to play the game, you spent a lot more time figuring out how to play them. Like the old Nintendo games, we talked about, you know, you go to the Blockbuster or whatever, you rent a game, and you come home, and one of the first things you do in any game is, like, press every single button, press the buttons in every combination you can think of to see if they will do anything. And so I think games that give you sort of the opportunity to discover things on your own, you know, without the, hey, fairy in your face, like, telling you how to do everything, yeah, that is very engaging to me. And plus, like, I haven't even made it a whole day yet, and I would really like to do that.
Yeah, so to give you a frame of reference, until about maybe 6 weeks ago, I was only able to survive for 5 days, and then our play testers right now, we've got about 20 of our what we call super backers, so people who really supported us through our Kickstarter campaign with a large amount of money, have been playing for about a month now. And they've managed to crack the 20-day mark. So if you can imagine you're struggling for 1 day, wow. These guys have far exceeded anything that we've been able to do in the game. And it's just been because they've kept going back, you know, and they keep learning new ways to optimize and you know, learn more about the world. They learn more about how the mechanics work. It's really been inspiring for us to kind of read about their experiences and sort of see how they're learning to play the game. And I think going back to, you know, we always call it a simulation for good reason. Like, it goes back to when I started playing games when I was a kid. it was like flight simulators like F-15 Strike Eagle and Silent Service, the submarine simulation, and Falcon 2.0. And I remember with Falcon, like, it had that giant manual, and it took like 2 hours to figure out how to take off from the runway. And today you'd never make a game like that, but when you had a success, like, it was your success, right? You figured it out. It wasn't that the game just told you to press certain buttons and you did them, and then you got a pat in the back. And I think that's really the feeling that we've been trying to achieve here with the game, or what we want to evoke with our players, is that, yeah, you fail a lot, but then sometimes you succeed, and when you succeed, it feels amazing because you figured out how to do it. So hopefully you're getting to sense, feel a little bit of that right now.
Well, I'm feeling, I mean, like, obviously I found this nice little park area where I could survive, but once I've taken everything out of it, everything's gone. It's not like I can stay there for very long. I'll have to move on somewhere else. I guess I'm not sure how long you'd have to play before you sort of really fell into and can appreciate sort of the loop, that survival loop.
Well, one of the things that's interesting,
this is how I spend my days.
One of the things that we've seen in our playtesting that's been really interesting is the game changes the longer you survive. So what you're experiencing right now is, this is kind of the easy pickings, right? Is that you're just going around, you're finding different locations, you're kind of looting them as you go. But as you said, we're not respawning the loot. Like, once you take it and use it up, it's gone. And at some point, probably around day 5, if you're really, really good, you're going to have used up most of the easy resources. And now you're going to have to think about foraging and hunting, and you have to repair your clothing, and you have to be really judicious about your first aid supplies, because you might sprain your ankle or get food poisoning because you ate a bad can of peaches or whatever it happens to be, right? So, the game does change over time, and the survival mechanics, in a lot of ways, become more challenging, and really, put a lot more onus on the player to sort of plan ahead and think about how they're going to do things. And so, for me personally, that's been really rewarding to see that, because I think our players are learning how to survive within the simulation framework that we've created here. And I can't speak for them, but I think what I've seen based on feedback is it's really resonating with them.
Folks, we're going to be back in just 30 seconds. We're taking another little quick break. Raphael, I think a lot of what you're talking about, and something you keep going back to, you're talking about making sure your game is not filled with all of this crap, that it's just sort of there to make you feel like you're doing something, or all of these different moments where a game tells you what you're supposed to do, and then you're rewarded with a little pat on the back, as you put it. Mm-hmm. And really, it's getting it. You're talking about getting a game made that trusts the player inherently. Like, when they fire it up, that you are trusting the player to be willing to explore, to be willing to fail. And, like, what to you is the one-sentence secret to making a game that trusts the player without making sure that they get so frustrated by difficulty that they quit? How do you make an environment that is very, very demanding and forbidding and horrifying in a lot of ways, but still feels like a place you want to go back to again and again?
I think the answer is, it's not just that we trust the player, we're teaching them to trust themselves again, in a way. Like, their instincts as gamers have been trained over years, to not believe that they can learn how systems work, that really it's the game that needs to tell them how to play the game, and they just press the buttons kind of when they're supposed to. And besides that, it's really, we look at our job as being putting interesting choices in front of the player and providing them with the tools that they need to make good decisions around the data that we're giving them, but not making the decisions for them. So, I often say this to the team, like, most games give you they give you the question and they give you the answer, and we're just giving you the question. Mm-hmm. We're just putting the question out there for you to answer on your own, and we're going to put all the tools you need to do it, but we're not going to put them within easy reach. You're going to have to work to figure it out. And one of the things that's been really rewarding, I think, for us is when we do, when playtesters do fail, and you fail a lot, as you can imagine, they never blame the game. They always say, oh, I know what I did wrong. Like, I made this bad decision at this point, and that was on me, and next time I'll know to do it differently. And you know, when I think about all the times where I play games and I get frustrated and I just get pissed off at the game because it feels like the game is unfair, you know, I think just doing whatever we can to avoid eliciting that feeling from our players is really the key.
Yeah.
And you know, hopefully we'll have accomplished that.
All right. One little question here from the chat. This is Daw 250-190. Daw. Sorry if this has been answered or covered, but I have a question about buildings. Are building interiors a separate instance, or do things going on outside have an impact? For example, can a wolf outside come in through the door or come in through a window?
I heard a big nasty growl when I was in the last building.
That was your stomach.
Sounded more like a bear than a wolf.
I'm not even joking. So most of the interiors are instanced separately.
All right.
And we do that for a bunch of different reasons. One is randomization. Two is just content creation, optimization, et cetera, et cetera. But there are locations that are actually linked, you know, within the world. So, for example, if you climb to the top of one of the mountains in this region, you'll find a lookout tower that is not a separate instance. So, you know, you can see the weather outside the windows and, you know, the time of day changing, et cetera, et cetera. We've been pretty careful for things like the lookout, or we have wolf hunting blinds sometimes in the world that you can take shelter in. And we've sort of created them as relatively safe zones because you need some place to be able to go once in a while. You need to be able to know that if you decide to start a fire in a certain location that, well, for the most part, to be honest, you know, anytime you're outside, there's a chance that you're going to wake up with a wolf in your face. And that's just the way it is. But, you know, we still, for example, that trapper's cabin that you were at in an earlier playthrough, you know, for a long time we referred to that as a safe house. And we kind of wanted to create that feeling while you're in there that as long as you're careful about your food and water and you've got the fuel supplies that you need, that it's going to be okay for you to stay there, and you're not going to get, you know, you're not going to wake up with the teeth chewing on you. But yeah, so to answer the question more succinctly, yeah, most of the interiors are instanced, but there are some that are that aren't.
Richard, how's it going?
I'm in this warehouse that does not at all feel safe to me. Well, I'm inside the dam. I found a dam, and it's very dark.
Is it a... Oh man, I can't believe I almost said that. I like the flare effect. The look of the flare is really cool.
Yeah, I should shout out to the team. You know, the team is just doing an amazing job. I mentioned Alan and Dave, who are here in the chat room right now. You know, we have Eric and Max, who are the main artists on the project. Trudy is our concept artist, who's done amazing work for us as well. We have Nathaniel, who's been helping us with animation. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but yeah, I mean, it's really been a wonderful team effort, and for me, it's just been a great honor to be able to sort of work with each of these people every day.
Raph, there's a question here from 1.21 that says, what are some ideas planned for release that aren't yet in the game? So you talked about AI a little bit earlier, but anything else, any stuff that is still on the way that'll, you know, be in the Sandbox by the time the early access version is available, or even beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always working on features. We're taking existing features and deepening them. For example, we have a fairly simplistic sort of animal harvesting mechanic right now that we're putting some extra polish on right now and adding some layers of gameplay to. You know, the NPC AI is obviously a huge challenge. It's also a big part of what will make the Sandbox interesting beyond just the environmental challenge. And so that's something that we're going to be continuing to work on. And I think that's really going to be a big kind of marquee feature for us. You know, we're building more regions of the world. We're going to have another region that's about the same size as this one. You know, we're aiming to have that ready for early access. So what we're finding is a lot of people are getting about, you know, 5-6 hours of easy playtime without a lot of repetition in this one Sandbox space that you're playing in right now. You know, we're hoping that with another one that there's actually going to be quite a lot of value, you know, to the Sandbox when we release it at early access. And yeah, we're going to continue evolving various systems. Like crafting is something that we don't have it in the traditional sense. We have a repair, and you can make things, but it's not such a focus for us as it is in a game like Minecraft, for example. But it's definitely something that's on the table, and that's something that we're kind of looking to hear more from our community, you know, about whether that's something they'd like to see us deepening more. We'd like to put a lot more emphasis on hunting. We want to get a trapping system in there. So as you see when you're walking through the world, you can see your footsteps in the snow. Well, we want to be able to see animal footsteps and see those accumulating over time, so you can start to see where different types of wildlife will frequent, so you can set traps for them and harvest them that way. You know, right now the wood harvesting is fairly simplistic, and we want to deepen that as well so that we can, you know, have a little bit more direct object interaction. Right now it's more of a, you know, straight up trade, investing time for wood, for fuel resources. So, you know, we're always building on the framework that we've started with, and you know, I think the idea here is that it's a really solid vertical slice and sense of what the game is all about, and we're just going to keep building on it as we go.
I'm totally enwrapped by Richard wandering through this factory at this point. Can't stop staring at the... I love the abstraction of certain things. I like the abstraction of fire.
Oh. Dead man. Hey, dead man with stuff.
That'll come in handy.
You're welcome.
Just
Got me a hatchet.
Vicious, Richard. Just
Flares.
vicious.
Can opener.
Now eat him.
Why did you die? You were loaded.
Eat that dead guy.
Hey, you know, is that an option? Because
haven't decided yet.
haven't decided on.
Well, I was actually, Rav, I'm curious. How do you sort of decide? You know, because the suggestion of realities is often far more powerful than actual reality. You know, you don't want it to be an exacting simulation, because that often won't get the most powerful emotional reaction. So, you know, like, we joke, oh, can you eat him? But, like, you know, if this was a full-on simulation where suddenly you could do anything, maybe you could resort to cannibalism to survive. But you want to keep the choices, you know, limited to what makes the game fun, or at least, you know, engaging. So how do you go about deciding what's going to be the most useful feature in the world? Like, how do you say to yourself, like, oh, well, this is how you're going to have to fend off a wolf when it's biting your face off, but without making it, you know, just
I could use this
ridiculous, unrealistic video game combat?
Well, I mean, the wolf one is an interesting example, because for a really, really long time, basically, if a wolf got close to you, you were dead. Like, there wasn't really anything you could do about it. You could use a flare to try and scare it away, or you could start a fire to keep it at bay, but you couldn't really kill it if it had attacked you. And we added the wolf struggle system because we thought, you know, what's a way that we can give the player a little bit more of an active way in which to, you know, fight with a threat that exists in the world. And, you know, we talked a lot about the right way to do that, and as you can see, like, everything here is very simulation focused, but the fight with the wolf is sort of a different type of gameplay. And, you know, with that sort of struggling mechanic, and, you know, that was very intentional, because we said to ourselves, well, you know, it should feel uncomfortable when that happens. It shouldn't be something that's so similar to everything else that you've done in the game that it doesn't have any impact anymore. And I think that's generally what we're always looking for is, you know, I've talked about this already, but trying to, you know, empower the player to make interesting choices. You know, going back to the cannibalism thing, I think the sort of the guide that we tend to use is trying to, again, to empower the player to make decisions that they think are interesting. And, you know, we're not there to make, you know, pass moral judgment on players, but we are trying to create a simulation that sort of makes you think about what you're doing, and hopefully with something like cannibalism, it, you know, without falling back on some kind of simplistic karma system or morality system or whatever, I think you wouldn't want to be able to do something like that with total impunity. Like, you know, you'd want there to be some kind of consequences to that. And I think that, you know, the challenge there is how to do it without making it feel too gamey, without taking away the players' their own authorship, without making them feel too penalized, et cetera, et cetera. So those types of things are quite challenging. And I mean, we've always talked about our tagline for the game being, how far will you go to survive? And that was really, you know, one of the big sort of subtexts there is really about, those moral choices. And that's something that we'll definitely be fleshing out a lot more. You'll see that when the NPC AI are in the game, that's really what that whole interaction is going to be built around.
Raphael, Scorpio Symbol here in the chat has made a very keen observation. This game needs more Tim Hortons. Are there any Tim Hortons left on Vancouver Island to raid after the geomagnetic apocalypse?
That I sure hope so.
Oh, I can't start a campfire indoors.
I sure hope so. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a question that's made in jest, but I think it's a good question because there's still a lot of sort of world building that we're putting into the game in terms of the brands on gear items and the labels of things, and getting more of a sense of the lore of the world, and that's something that we're building on over time. Whether it's actually a Tim Hortons or not, I can't say, but definitely we want the game to feel like a real place, right?
If we can get a radio or at least a tape deck that still has some battery power, you can listen to some Sloan records, some I Mother Earth. I'm running out of mid-90s Canadian bands to reference.
Oleander?
Our Lady Peace? Is Our Lady Peace Canadian? I think so.
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, we only have a few minutes left on the stream today. If you have any questions remaining for Hinterland Games, speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't know why, it's a marriage. Raph, when is the game going to be coming to early access? You said fall. Do you have a date?
All we've said is September. So we've kept it a little bit open. We'd like to try to get it into the first half of September. Right now, the thing that we're trying to be careful about is how we scale up. We've got about 500 or so, or maybe 800 more playtesters coming in over the next few weeks. Then we're going to have an even bigger group coming in. Early access is going to be a huge, well, hopefully if we have any kind of success, it'll be a large number of people suddenly playing the game. We want to make sure that we're in a good position to take all that feedback, to deal with the bugs. So that's been a focus for us right now. So that if there's any reason why that date might sort of slip a little bit into later September, it's going to be just around us wanting to be prepared for that. But yeah, we're committed to get into early access in September, and it's not that far away actually.
Yeah, very close. Do you have a price for the early access version of the game?
Yeah, we've pegged it at $19.99.
All right.
And if anybody's interested in learning more about the game or any of the pre-order things we're doing, we just launched a new website today. It's at intothelongdark.com. There's a story trailer on there that we also launched, and there's a pre-order section that has sort of 3 pre-orders and then a 4th one, which is for the soundtrack, which is being composed by Chris Velasco and Sasha Ditchikian, who are just award-winning, amazing composers that have done music for like Mass Effect and God of War and just all kinds of big AAA franchises. So if you listen to the trailer, the music from that is Chris Velasco. And so have a look, and there's a bunch of information. There's FAQs, there's a link to our blog. Our community forums are linked there at hinterlandforums.com. So we'd love to have as many of you as possible in there to join us in the community, participate in what's going on, and just let us know what you think.
Richard, how are you going to end this, man?
Well, I'm gonna drink some water. I'm going to eat a bunch of food here, and then I'm gonna sleep and see if I die.
So there's a question about, can you toggle between Celsius and Fahrenheit? And yes, you can. You can do it right now, actually, in the options.
Sure. Let me just finish eating my pork and beans here. Let's see, option.
No, if you go to escape.
It's under display.
Yeah.
Imperial.
There you go.
And then I'm gonna finish eating the rest of them. I'm gonna eat another pork and beans because that really.
Oh God! I really hope you wake up and there is a wolf eating the pork and beans.
I should mention that we just added dysentery to the game, so if you drink bad water, you'll get dysentery and you'll be very sick.
Oh.
There's actually food poisoning already and a host of other maladies. So yeah.
I did notice when I was at the stove that it gave me the option to boil water or snow.
Yeah, you can melt snow, but then if you drink it at that point, there's a chance you'll get sick from it, so you have to boil it to be sure. So yeah.
All right, I'm gonna sleep next to this little lamp for whatever meager warmth
See how
it
it
can give me.
goes.
It says it's -1 degree Celsius, but it feels like 4. Like I feel like that's survivable weather.
Yeah, you won't die from
sleep for
cold in that place.
Okay, I'm gonna sleep for 6 hours just like I did before.
Get in that comfy sleeping bag. Do it.
It's just a bedroll, man. It's not even a bag.
Yeah!
I did it!
You haven't done it yet.
Oh.
Oh, there you are.
Well,
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you made it.
God, it's so dark. I'm gonna turn on my other lantern. I have 2 lanterns because that's how I roll. And then just to prove that I am in fact alive. And
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Richard has lived through the night, and the long dark continues to wake up to its first dawn as a full game. Raphael, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the game with us. It looks really, really cool.
Thank you so much for the chance to talk with you guys in your community about it, and thanks for playing. It looks like you had a good time.
Hell yeah!
yeah,
Hell yeah!
yeah, I did.
Everybody, please go to the new website for The Long Dark if you want to know more about it. That's intothelongdark.com. And you can follow Hinterland Games on Twitter. It's just @Hinterland Games. And you can follow Joystiq on Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus by searching Joystiq with a Q. Yeah.
I'm gonna. I found.
You find a wolf.
So. Nope. I found.
Do it! Jump! Jump for fun!
Oh, nope. Wasn't enough. I don't think I sprained my ankle.
Ladies and gentlemen, our week of harrowing horror games will continue tomorrow as Zav D'Amatos plays Eternal Darkness for the first time in his entire life.
Because he's a horrible.
I don't know how that happens in this day and age. It's gonna get weird, everybody. It's gonna get weird. Canadian games weird in a totally different way tomorrow. So
yeah, played by a Canadian.
So tune in for that. And then on Thursday, we're going to be playing Road Not Taken, which looks really unassuming and adorable. And then you remember that it's all about trying to stop children in your care from dying.
But I'll make it.
And then Friday is going to be different. Everybody go to joystiq.com tomorrow, and you can vote on what we're going to play on Friday. You will have your pick from a selection of bizarre games that are spooky and bloody and disgusting. Illbleed for Dreamcast, Demon's Crest for Super Nintendo. We're gonna talk about it. It's gonna be a whole thing. Anyway, everybody,
now I've got a sprained ankle. I'm
do it.
And then you can. There we go. 9 hours, 43 minutes.
Yeah,
that's a work day.
You put in a solid day's work of surviving, Richard. Everybody, we will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Joystiq.com/Twitch. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.